Started and get the recording on. All right. Thank you everyone for being here and welcome to this expert session for the Economic Development Working Group for the Redwood Rise region. This is the last working group of the calendar year for 2025, but we'll be continuing into 2026. So we will see everyone again in January. And Susan Seaman is our chair for this group. She is out under the weather, and Josh Schmitz is usually representing RGS for this group, and he had a conflict today. So I'm Zena Bradford, and I'm filling in Josh's spot today, kind of facilitating this discussion. But thank you, Matthew, especially for being Matthew Marshall, for being here, and he will be the co-chair of this presentation. Matthew is the one who put together this topic on tribal and regional clean energy and finance and has lined up a wonderful group of expert speakers who will be presenting here today. So with not much ado, it was really great to see everybody who was able to make it to the November 5th for our last session, the convening at the Blue Lake Crateria. That was really wonderful to see everyone, and we hope to see everyone at the next convening. So I'm just going to pull up some slides really quick here and share just to introduce the presentation, and then I'll hand it over to Matthew to introduce the panel. Okay. So the topic of today, if everybody can see my presentation, is the tribal and regional clean energy finance. And why are we not clicking? There you go. So we'll be discussing today the topics of discussions will be tribal clean energy and finance, credits and incentives, and regional coordination. And with that, I will pass it on actually to Matthew Marshall. Take it away and introduce our panel, and I can click through the slides as you please.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm super grateful that we have a great panel and Matthew Marshall with the Blue Lake Rancheria. And in the RISE context, the Rancheria is the Resilient and Renewable Energy Sector Investment Coordinator. So helping kind of uh, manage and coordinate activities for the energy sector in the region for RISE. And so Todd is with the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, and it's an organization that we've actually just recently become familiar with, who's providing a lot of great technical assistance and granting and financing support for tribes that are working on clean energy. And then, Todd brings, you can see his bio here, and it'll be in the materials afterwards. But he's got a long track record, both working with tribes, but also in kind of heavy lifting in the energy project development and finance sector. So he's got a lot of great expertise. And then our next presenter is going to be, excuse me, Craig, who's been with Miles Adams for many years, which is just, we were talking about merging with Baker Tilly. So he's got decades of experience working on with accounting, but with a particular expertise in tax credits and energy credits. And that's a landscape that's been a very much moving target. When I started talking with Craig earlier this summer, it's like, well, we don't know what to present. That's part of the reason why this session got delayed. Was it was like, well, we could tell a bunch of people information, and then 2 weeks later it's going to be different, and it still might be different in 2 weeks, but at least it's sort of, there's a little bit of a settled in of what the current federal administration's policy changes have been, as far as what the current lay of the land is of how you can pursue those and what it looks like. And so for now, at least, it seems like there's a little bit of some ground to stand on for what can and can't work. And then Rich, um, Rich is a pinch hitter as of like this afternoon, basically, who's stepping in for a colleague who, like myself, is not feeling the best today. Um, and so he's with the Mendocino Council of Governments, but here to talk about the Northern Rural Energy Network, which is a new initiative that's going to be serving Humboldt, Mendocino, and Lake counties with a range of energy programs, rebates, incentives. There's going to be financing, and he's going to talk about that. And so it's a key resource of like where to start for an energy project in those counties. And it's a exciting new effort that's funded by the state, and that'll be sort of a locally designed and locally driven program offering in our region. And I'll just end my comments by saying, energy project financing is interesting because unlike a lot of things, there's kind of a fundamental sort of financial analysis that you can do in the sense that whether you're doing a project that's sort of a customer project that's reducing your energy costs, whether it's solar or energy efficiency, if you're reducing your bill, you can calculate like kind of hard numbers on what your payback is going to be for that energy project. Or if you're doing something that's selling power, like a solar array that's selling power back to, the utility or energy provider for your region, you can have a power purchase agreement that has like terms for like 25 years. You're going to get this, payment. And so, you can kind of run numbers on the financials for an energy project in a much more solid way in some ways than you can for, other kind of commercial projects like if a restaurant's trying to expand to a second location, there's a lot more perhaps uncertainty for the economics of that versus energy project that can have a pretty kind of firm payback period. That's not to say that there isn't a lot of volatility in the energy markets and things that can disrupt that, but there is sort of there's a specific revenue stream for energy projects that you can sometimes calculate with a pretty confident level of risk, um, that's different than maybe other types of financing. So that sort of um, revenue or cost reduction calculation enters into energy project financing in, I think, a way that's different than other kinds of investments sometimes. So with that, um, hand it over to Todd to kick us off.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. Had to move right next to my router because my Wi-Fi, for some reason, is being a little extra sensitive. But let me go ahead and just get my presentation up here. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, you sound good,
Great.
Todd. Thank you.
And sending everybody healing vibes from the Fresh Coast and the Great Lakes region. I'm located just north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I lived for a number of years in Northern California. It's a very special, near and dear place in my heart, and was fortunate enough to get to visit Blue Lake Rancheria, the Yurok tribe in Hoopa Valley just a few weeks ago and meet the amazing team over there at the Shots Energy Research Center. So, fantastic trip. Apologies, just this up. Let's see. Okay. All right, so while that's loading, I'll go ahead and get started. Are you able to see my screen all right now?
Yes, it looks
It should
good.
say supporting the self-determined pursuit. Okay,
Yes,
great. Thank you.
good job.
So hi, everyone. I'm Tyson, the head of energy finance and structuring at the Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy. Thank you very much for the invitation to join. The Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in 2016 by my boss, Sherry Smith, She's a former Solar City employee, and after Tesla absorbed Solar City, she was reporting into Elon Musk, not her favorite boss of all time. But she's very deep knowledge in the space, along with the rest of our team. We're a bunch of clean energy veterans for the most part, and former feds and academics, and just a great team of a native and women-led organization. I myself am not native, but about 75% or so of our team is, as well as about 60% are women. I came out of corporate America, and it's such a relief to be working with more women than I did in the corporate space. Our team's divided amongst four pillars. We're kind of a one-stop shop for tribal communities to come and get support, and this is 100% pro bono support for tribal communities. Our donors fund us to provide free services to tribes, and best in class, best quality, using all our relationships, all of our lessons learned in our decades of experience in the space. So we've got technical assistance and project finance. So this could be anything regarding technology or sourcing or structuring capital. We've got an amazing energy policy and government relations team led by Dr. Crystal Miller, Walker River Paiute, the first PhD awardee of the Walker River Paiute tribe, and just an amazing person to work with. We host a number of events throughout the year. Convening is very important to us, as well as education and workforce development, and that's led by Dr. Ramon Sanchez, who taught at Harvard for about 15 years, and he's got an amazing teammate, Angela Lucas, on their team, doing all sorts of neat work. And please feel free to check out our website to dig in deeper on the team. But what I was wanting to present here today is information on my team, being the finance team, the finance organization at the Alliance, which is comprised of myself and Landon Jennings and Remy Schneider. Remy's a recent Yale graduate, well, from their graduate school program, and he was formerly in our policy team. And Landon is a finance graduate from University of Arkansas, and is going to be starting up a sustainability program at University of Oklahoma real soon. Remy is citizen of the Omaha tribe of Nebraska, and Landon is Choctaw and Pomo, and they're both deeply engaged in our financial modeling and what we call the Weaver platform. What the Weaver platform is it's a tool set of services, tools and services that can be utilized to develop projects from initial conception, when it's your first idea of wanting to pursue clean technology, all the way through construction and into operations. We can onboard project inputs and develop a financial model, and then trace the entire walk from that project's initial concept through operations, through our financial model. And we can assist with keeping costs down, whether it be development costs, financing costs, transaction costs, and help with supporting sensitivity analysis to inform good decision making through the development, construction, and into operations. Maybe stepping back real quickly about myself before I go any further on our services. I started my career as a school teacher at smack dab in the middle of Navajo Nation and Rough Rock chapter, and then moved up to the Bay Area working at a continuation school in Fairfield, California, where I taught environmental science and led a garden program, which was the coolest job I had until the job I'm in right now. But I got a little emotionally burnt out after a number of years and needed to take a break. And of all things, I hopped on the solar coaster in 2006, 2007, right before the financial crisis. But our startup solar IPP that was based, independent power producer that was based in Northern California, we were a small team of some really resilient, tough folks that battled it out and worked our way through and developed four portfolios of some really cool projects. A lot of water treatment facilities, a lot of schools, hospitals, universities, And we became a target for NRG Energy, which was the largest buyer of coal at the time. They ended up acquiring our team as their distributed generation platform, as they were looking to transition from being the largest buyer of coal in the country to one of the larger buyers of clean energy projects in the country. A year later, I was the only one left at the company, or my original company. It was a clunky integration, but they took a liking to me, and I took a real interest in the mission and the transition from brown to green that they were endeavoring in. And I saw a lot of good, bad, and ugly mistakes, and in the renewable space. And they took a liking to me, perhaps because I was a little too honest sometimes, but I got recruited over to the chief risk officers to work under the chief risk officer and the chief financial officer at NRG, and got to write all the risk policy, operational controls, and underwrite every project for a good chunk of time, well over $1 billion, closer to $10 billion of capital deployed, a gigawatt of projects, hundreds from coast to coast, and all sorts of tax equity structures and debt and equity profiles in the projects and portfolios. So I'm one of the people out there who's kind of been there, done that, and really appreciate being able to take all those lessons learned. In running an analyst team, I actually had a group of about 40 at one point at NRG, overseeing everything on a retail side of the shop, which we had about 4 million customers at the time, as well as our renewable investment. So I've been fortunate enough to take all the lessons learned there and all the contacts, just as importantly, for developing and financing all these projects, and now I'm able to bring that to Indian country, and it's been an amazing opportunity and a lot of fun and really uplifting in my life to get to learn more about communities that mean so much to me and be able to apply all the good knowledge and lessons learned. So the Weaver models I was referencing before, this is a model set up for solar, wind, battery, and geothermal. We can model them independently. We can model them all at once. We can look at any most tax structures, and debt assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. And it's set up as a completely transparent model. So this is nothing fancy. This is no black box. Any good Excel user can look at the model and dig deep into it and trace all the formulas. There's nothing hidden, no macros. It's coded by one of the best in the business. It's somebody I've worked with for 15 plus years, who's worked with all the labs, all the big banks, all the big IPPs. He's on the leading edge of modeling and is about to retire. And I'm so happy he's provided us with such great service in the model so we can run with it from here on out. So the model is set up for cash flow analysis primarily. And what that means is projects that are going to be paying for themselves essentially through time by the payment of or the revenue streams that can come off of the projects. So this is not a model for how to stack grants to get your capital stack completed for financing a grant funded project. This can utilize grant funding. It can utilize anybody's funding essentially to show you how much leverage or debt could potentially be applied to a project, how fast that debt could be paid down, and how different revenue streams or production profiles or own operations and maintenance profiles um, can um, can be modeled or be optimized for a given project. I'm not going to go in all this because I only have so much time and I want to make sure I hit on all the main points. Oh, one thing I did want to point out though is investment grade financial statements. So this is very important for raising funds. The model's only as good as the inputs that are applied to it. So that's something our technical assistance team helps with, as well as myself and others, to make sure that some of the best people in the industry are always informing the values in the model. Because, as we say in the analytics space, garbage in, garbage out with any financial model. And um, so once we've got sign off on all our inputs, it easily cranks out balance sheets, cash statements of cash flows, and income statements that could be shared with any financial institution, lender, investor, philanthropy. It's a really handy resource that usually costs a lot of money for tribes to be able to access, but we can get you started right off the bat with wherever tribes are at their moment in time with their project. We can get you started for free. Just quick example of some of the analytics and graphs that can easily be presented through our model. Now, it's not a tool for for analyzing billing data. So a lot of times you'll hear of financial models or solar models, and it may be more on the customer benefit side, looking at avoided costs, the costs that otherwise would have been incurred by a utility and now are being incurred through some other payment stream. This doesn't account for, or this doesn't calculate savings. It calculates the economic viability of a specific project, but not the benefit for the community. Now, that is something we can help out with, but I just wanted to be clear that the model we're talking about here is this is just a discounted cash flow, not a savings calculator. Um, the template document library that we're developing alongside the model, this is in partnership with our friends at Clean Energy Council, who are one of the better, uh, very experienced shop of transaction lawyers in clean energy space, coming out of a number of the biggest of the big project finance firms. We've pulled together the doc set with them, along with Sam Cohen at Kaplan Kirsch, who's a tribal law expert. So we're already integrating template language to get the conversation going, because this is something that, frankly, in the commercial space and on the desks that I've worked on in the past, if tribal projects came to the desk, oftentimes we'd hear, don't go there. That sounds too complicated. We don't want to deal with sovereignty. We don't know how to work through that. Well, I'm at the point in my career is we're working through that no matter what. And here's some template language to get us started. Get rid of perceived risk in your mind that you think that the tribal projects are inherently more risky. That's not the case. And here's a path forward to working through and hopefully avoiding a lot of the perceived risk and breaking down barriers right off the bat to try and build as many quality partnerships and relationships as we can, because at the end of the day, it's all about relationships to be able to pull all the complexity of these projects together. And they are complex and they are hard, but it's all worth the effort and it can all be done. Where there's a will, there's a way in all this work. So you see there's a number of documents and it's a growing document set. And again, this is all free for tribes to utilize, and it's developed by some of the best in the biz. So I consider all of these materials and tools to be investment grade. But again, it's only as good as the information that goes in them. So need to make sure that you're still working with pros to populate them correctly. We can also help with renewable energy credit or carbon reduction unit market strategy, building relationships, helping develop pitch decks to be able to market projects. This can allow for an additional revenue stream beyond just the energy components of selling electrons in the form of kilowatt hours or capacity in the form of kilowatts or megawatts. Renewable energy credits are effectively just selling off the environmental attributes or the environmental statements. Essentially, if you are generating power for a clean power plant, you have to own the RECs to be able to claim the green attributes. But you can sell the RECs, but then you can't say that I'm operating or that our business or our community or our home is green powered if you sold the environmental attributes. There are some tricks there, like you can sell the RECs for your project and then buy cheaper RECs from the market and still claim your greenness. So there's some workarounds, and we can help with strategy and thinking through the pros and cons of the various strategies. We can also help with ITC strategies. This is something that the Baker Tilly team is great at. We're very close with the Baker Tilly team, and love working with them, and strongly advise that all filing work and assistance with document preparation and strategy be worked alongside with a pro shop like Baker Tilly. But for initial help in scoping, work, you could always feel free to reach out to us. I actually work very closely with Joel Lovenstein, who's one of the tribal leads or the tribal lead over at Baker Tilly. He's a great guy, great to work with. Really enjoy working with the team. But again, something we can help out with right off the bat with financial modeling. We can start working that in. You don't need to be going to advisors, or we can give you some good counsel right from the start. Here's just another quick list of some of our other offerings that we provide. It's, again, kind of a one-stop shop for project finance support, free support for tribal communities. Please feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also operate an Indigenous Power and Light Fund for energy sovereignty. This is managed by Anna LeBeau, who is the former head of Office of Indian Economic Development at BIA. The Tribal Electrification Program was one of her pet projects, and it's fun to be working on a couple of projects that were awarded, and the funds actually flowed through on that program alongside her. The fund is primarily being used right now for emergency response, and there's a lot of that going on right now. To keep projects going, we're deploying a lot of it up in Alaska right now. We funded some work down here in the lower 40 and working with some Northern California tribes right now in some of their applications. It's a great support to keep projects on track or to get projects started. And then we can support with takeout financing and construction financing to help build up the rest of the capital stack. We go out well, we work with all the biggest philanthropy and are in communication with a growing list of impact investors. And that's primarily where I've been reaching out to and where I've been focused with my fundraising efforts for tribal projects. And I'm really excited about the momentum, but I gotta say the momentum's really being driven by a lot of the amazing projects that are being developed in Indian country, including, and especially, I should say, Blue Lake Rancheria, just such a model for so many communities right now, and so much great work going on in the Northern California region. We fund up to 500,000 per year per tribe in grants, and then loans up to 1 million. And the loan terms and pricing really depends on the underlying project characteristics. So it's to be determined in terms of repayment period, interest rates, et cetera. But our goal is not to make money. It's to break even or cover our costs and to get as many good quality projects built in Indian country in the best way possible, working with the communities and community-led projects through and through. So I think I'm guessing I'm probably about at my time, but please feel free to reach out to me anytime personally. I'm Todd at tribalcleanenergy.org, or our finance team, and as a bigger group, got a picture here of Landon, Remy, and I. If you'd like to reach out, we always appreciate starting our engagements with our tribal engagement team led by Matt Dannenberg, who is the formerly the head of Indian Energy at the Department of Energy. Great guy, and actually lives just down, well, about 20 minutes from me. We get to hang out quite a bit, but you can reach him at tribes or at Matt at tribalcleanenergy.org. And happy to field any questions. I'm guessing it's probably coming after everybody goes through their presentations, but
Yeah,
I'll stop
yeah, thank
sharing
you,
here.
Todd.
Thank
That
you.
was great. And I think what we'll do is we'll kind of do the presentations and then we'll have questions at the end. So if folks do have questions, jot that down on a post-it note for
All
yourself.
right.
And thanks so
Yeah.
much,
Sorry, I was a little
Todd.
clunky there at the beginning. I had a dog escape and was at my feet, and I was trying to figure out how I can kick the dog away and get started on my presentation at the same time.
I always remember back in like the early Zoom days where there was like that guy that was like on CNBC or something in Hong Kong, and his like kid wanders in, and then the wife's trying, and it's like now we're all just like whatever, unless there's like, you know, like chupacabras
Yeah,
or something.
survive
It's like, oh, a kid running in isn't a big deal. It's like, but
whatever it takes to
back
get
then it
through.
was like, oh my gosh, it's embarrassing, but
Yeah.
I've grown so much in the Zoom world. Um, so next step, we've got Craig, who Todd alluded to, the tax credits. And I think if this session was last December, it would probably just be an hour and a half on all the great tax
Yeah.
credits. And so that has changed, but not evaporated. So,
Well, I think the good news is there's still a lot of opportunity. There have been some changes, and we'll go through what those changes have been. And there are paths forward, but certain technologies are narrowing. So I will. Oh, that's an interesting share screen. Let's see if this will work, and hopefully that does. And you can see, or oh, I have to press the share button. All right. So hopefully that works and you can see. Um, just real quick, again, my name's Craig Lamlin. I'm a managing director. I've spent 25 years working in the credits and incentive space. And really, my focus since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act has been on the IRA. And then with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, or OB3, as I refer to it, the changes to that. So just real briefly, a little background on Moss Adams, or excuse me, not Moss Adams. I formerly worked for Moss Adams, and we merged into Baker Tilly, which is now the sixth largest accounting firm in the U.S. We have over 11,000 people. We have 47,000 professionals worldwide in our organization. We've been in business for well over 100 years. And ultimately speaking, for all of the issues related to tax credits that we'll be talking about, we have a solution to assist you in terms of making sure that you can document the requirements for your project, so that you meet the statutory requirements, the IRS interpretation of the regulations. And then lastly, in the event that there ever were to be an audit by the IRS, that you're able to, demonstrate that you've met all of those requirements and retain the benefits that the tribe has earned. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the IRA just very briefly, then some of the changes under OB3, talk about the impacted technologies and really the timing. And we are at the end of calendar 25. That does create some limitations for what's available, but there still are some important inflection dates that people need to be aware of. There's an abbreviation, FIAC implications, and that stands for Foreign Entity of Concern. We'll talk about those and what the reporting requirements are related to that. The big asterisk over that is we were hoping to get information from the IRS sooner, and we have not yet received it, but we'll talk about that and sort of where we sit with that. And then lastly, I mean, at the end of the day, there are certain things you can do to put yourself, your tribe, your organization in the best potential possible place you can be to obtain these benefits, because they're still very tangible and very real. All right. So the fastest history lesson in question, the IRA, or Inflation Reduction Act, came into law at the calendar end of 22, effective at the beginning of 2023. It was 700 plus pages, a ton, hundreds of billions of dollars in funding, and a huge amount of that was directed at clean energy incentives. The other side of that, which I think a number of organizations felt a little pain over the last year about, was there's a lot of grant funding tied into that. And with the passage of OB3 and later executive orders and whatnot, a significant amount of that was clawed back, or at least paused. But let's talk about where we are. So the One Big Beautiful Bill was passed on July 4th of 2025. It did a number of things. For our purposes, the real things that we're going to focus on are the changes to clean energy tax incentives, specifically around wind, solar, and the implementation of the Foreign Entity of Concern restrictions that are coming into place starting January 1 of 2026. And there are certain things we know and we can say on a timeline are definitely going to happen. And there are other aspects of this we just don't yet have interpretation by the IRS as to how they think those particular aspects of FIAC will be implemented. So let's talk about what has not changed to get started. So the first thing is for tribes that will be listening to this webcast either now or in the future, you still have the potential to earn up to a 50% investment tax credit. And when I say investment tax credit, I mean you're talking about a solar project or a wind project or a battery project or a geothermal project. And those projects can obtain up to a 50% credit by statute. There is an opportunity to earn an additional 10 or 20% if you file an application for a low income community bonus credit. It is not guaranteed that after you file that application, you will receive it. We've worked with some organizations that have been awarded. We've worked with other organizations that were not successful in obtaining those benefits. But the good news is the core credit still exists the way in which it did prior to the passage of OB3. What I would note as well, tribes are considered applicable entities, which means they are eligible for elective pay or direct pay, as we commonly refer to it, which means if you generate a $100 tax credit, you don't pay taxes as a tribe. But what you can do is you can receive that $100 tax credit as cash back after you file a 990T to claim that credit. There's a note on the slide regarding transferability. That is not something that is available for applicable entities such as tribes, but it still exists. So the baseline of where we start still exists. What has changed is the timeline related to claiming some of these credits, particularly around wind and solar. Those were the two big technologies. We'll also talk about EV chargers and EVs, but wind and solar, which are the big ticket items, seem to be the ones that were most negatively impacted under OB3. The other side of this, as I've alluded to, is the FIAC requirements. And in short, what we're going to be doing is for projects that begin construction after January 1st of 2026, FIAC requirements are going to start to kick in. And depending upon your project, there can be a 10-year reporting requirement associated with that. That's longer than what we traditionally see with a lot of investment tax credits where there's a 5-year recapture period. And then ultimately speaking, the last bullet point on this is regarding the grants that were funded under the IRA. There's been litigation. A number of the organizations that we've worked with have had funding frozen, then they've been able to obtain it. It's something that I think organizations need to focus on because grant payments in their capital stack, and I certainly defer to Todd on these things, are critically important for the financing of these projects. So something to be aware of. All right, so the impacted technologies. So when I talk about wind and solar, we're generally talking about either Section 48E, which is the tech neutral investment tax credit. And the idea there is you've got a bunch of solar panels, you put them in a field, you put them on top of a building, you place them in service, and they generate a credit one time in the year that they're placed in service, and you're able to claim that credit. It's kind of one and done. Whereas with a 45Y, that's a technology neutral production tax credit. That credit generates a credit every year for 10 years. What's important to note about these particular types of technologies is if you begin construction on your project before December 31st of 2025, you have what would be considered the normal 4-year window in order to place your project in service. So that's what most taxpayers are looking for, depending upon the size of their project, have that full length of time. However, if you do not begin construction before December 31st of 25, but you do begin construction sometime thereafter, but before July 4th of 26, you have to have your project placed in service by December 31st of 2027. So you have a significantly shorter window of time in order to place your project in service, not begin construction. It's a critical distinction between the two. So you would have to, have all your financing in place, put the project in service, have it attached to the grid, meet all of the requirements to be producing energy, and it is a significantly shorter time frame in order to make all of that happen. The other thing that will happen for both 48E and for 45Y, if you begin construction on or after January 1 of 26, is you're going to have to comply with the FEOC requirements. So we're going to talk about those in greater detail, both what we know and both what we do not know. If you're able to begin construction before the end of this calendar year, you've probably done yourself a tremendous service because you will be able to avoid the FEOC reporting requirements. FEOC is not something that is new. It actually existed under the Section 30D tax credit, which was one of the vehicle credits, but it has really expanded into a whole swath of other credits. And the goal of FEOC is essentially you can have foreign entity components in your project, but you just can't have too much. And we'll talk about that calculation in the later slides. So 45V, the clean hydrogen production tax credit, we're going to talk about these really super fast. That you have to begin construction prior to January 1 of 28. Previously it was going to go all the way out to January 1 of 2033. And then for a lot of our clients, a lot of tribal clients and others, 45W, which is the qualified clean commercial vehicle credit, that came to an end on September 30th of 25. So if your vehicles were not placed in service prior to that date, that credit is no longer available. And then ultimately Section 30C, which is the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit, or I just like to call it the EV charger credit. You still have an opportunity for that. Those projects have to be placed in service on or before June 30th of 2026. Just one little note on the EV charger credits. You have to meet prevailing wage requirements related to that credit. I would urge anyone that is considering trying to pursue that credit that they have a PWA solution in place before they begin that project. Doing those projects with that solution in place is significantly more cost effective than after the fact, and it has materially impacted a number of the EV charger credit projects that we've been involved in if it's done after the fact. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty on the Section 48 and 45Y. So for wind and solar facilities that begin construction after July 4th of 26, so that's 1 year since the passage of OB3, they would need to have their project placed in service on or before December 31st of 27. If you begin that construction prior to July 4th of 26, it's safe harbored, and you'll have until the end of 2030 to begin construction. Battery storage or energy storage technology is first, not subject to the greenhouse gas emission requirements that you find in Section 48E for other technologies. And that technology actually has until the end of 2033 to begin construction. So when we talk about a lot of the changes under OB3, what we're really talking about are solar and wind changes. Your other technologies, your geothermal, your hydro, just like energy storage, still exist and operate under the older rules where you would have 4 years to begin construction, and then 4 years, you begin construction and you have 4 years to place the project in service. Qualified fuel cells, we have a lot of clients that are doing this. Essentially, under OB3, the credit rate is now fixed at 30%. There is this one weird year during 2025, during 2025, where it is not eligible. But after that, you're able to obtain an ITC on fuel cells at 30%. So that was one of the perhaps winners under OB3. Nuclear facilities probably not likely to be applicable to most of our audience. But the FEOC rules, again, they're going to start to kick in on December 31st of this year. And, for technologies other than wind and solar, you're still going to be able to continue to claim these credits through 2033. And then they begin to phase out. You're going to get 100% for, facilities that begin construction during 23. Then you're going to step down 25% to 75% for that begin construction in 2034. And ultimately, this runs you really all the way to 2035. So I would suggest that the idea that OB3 completely killed all of the benefits under the IRA may not be exactly accurate. It did hurt wind and solar. That's indisputable. But for other technologies, and we see a lot of tribes dealing in those, there's still plenty of opportunity that's out there and available. All right. One important consideration under OB3, they aligned the percentages related to domestic content. There was a split between what happened under 45Y and under 48E. But ultimately speaking, this chart sort of lines up the percentages that you would need to achieve in order to meet domestic content. Domestic content is important for two reasons for tribes. One, it can get you an extra 10% bonus credit. But secondarily, if your project is over 1 megawatt and you do not meet domestic content, your project is subject to what they call elective pay phase out. And what that means is depending upon the year you're in, so for instance, in 2025, if your project is over 1 megawatt and it doesn't achieve the domestic content bonus credit, you would only receive 85% of your credit. If you do not meet domestic content requirements. It's a specific rule related to applicable entities. And in 2026, in calendar 26, if your project's over 1 megawatt and you don't meet domestic content requirements, you lose your credit entirely. So domestic content requirements are incredibly important for applicable entities, a la tribes, and making sure you achieve that. And as you can see, it just doesn't get easier as you go through the years. That percentage continues to climb. There is a waiver process that you can go through depending upon meeting that requirement if a manufactured product component is not available or the expense is 25% greater. But it's not necessarily a guarantee. So having somebody that can assist you on domestic content upfront is critically important. Again, transferability, not necessarily relevant for this audience. As we alluded to, elective pay or direct pay still remains an opportunity. The Section 48 geothermal heat pump equipment remains. There's a change, though, in the depreciation. But the core part of the credit, where we began on that first slide, your prevailing wage and apprenticeship 30% bonus credit still exists. Your domestic content 10% bonus credit still exists. And if you're located in an energy community, you can still receive an additional 10%. And that gets you to the 50% credit on your project. All right. So the executive order that really impacted most of the things we're talking about was done on July 7th of 25. And that in turn got the IRS to talk about they were supposed to talk about two things. They provided guidance on one. One was beginning of construction. And the second was that they were asked to provide foreign entity of concern guidance. And in the notice they put out in talking about beginning of construction, which we'll discuss, they said they just couldn't pull it together on FIAC. It's a really complicated thing. So let's just move along really quickly. So this gives you sort of a timeline to understand where we are. If you begin construction prior to December 31st of 25, you don't have to worry about complying with FIAC. You're good. You still get 4 years to put your project in service. If you begin your project before July 4th of 26, you still have to comply with FIAC, but you'll get the 4 years. But projects that begin construction after July 4th of 26 will have to both comply with FIAC and also be placed in service by December 31st of 2027. So hopefully this lays out in sort of a Gantt chart for you to take a look at the dates. Other technologies, however, your hydro, your fuel cells, all those other things, those still continue to operate through December 31st of 2033 at the full rate. The FIAC requirements, however, do begin starting January 1 of 26. So if you had a goal of safe harboring those, so you didn't have to comply with fiat, you would need to begin that in the next several weeks before December 31st. And then again, once you get past December 31st of 33, that's when you start to see the credits start to wind down on the other technologies. All right, beginning of construction. This is critically important, as I think the prior slides have alluded to. The IRS came out with notice 2025-42 in response to that executive order. And basically, what they did was they addressed the beginning of construction considerations. And if your project is over 1.5 megawatts, you really, and it's solar or wind. No, I said solar and wind as opposed to the other technologies. If you're over 1.5 megawatts, you really only have one option, and that is to begin physical work of a significant nature on your project to safe harbor it. If your project is below 1.5 megawatts and it's solar or wind, you still have an opportunity to take advantage of a 5% spend on the cost of your qualified project in order to safe harbor it. September 2nd, 2025 was a specific date in the notice where you're not able to go back and safe harbor things and retroactively apply these rules. Again, there's no changes related to the technology if they're outside of wind and solar. And there's no change to our interpretation of the continuity of construction. So if you begin construction in 25, you get 26, 27, 28, 29, and you get until December 31st of 29. So you get the full calendar year. It's not tied to the actual day you began construction in 2025. All right. So if your project is under 1.5 megawatts and it's wind and solar, or you're a different technology, you can spend 5% and safe harbor your project for purposes of beginning construction. So when we say 5%, no one is spending exactly 5% because no project ever comes in exactly what we thought it would be. You're probably going to be spending, a decent amount more than that. Some things to consider. You actually have to incur it. And there are some rules related to that. You have to have delivery or acceptance of the product or the service. You can take and look at large components that you may not be able to get all in one particular piece and break it down into different components with separate delivery dates. And then ultimately, there's a 3.5 month rule that products have to be delivered or accepted within 3.5 months of the payment to be considered incurred as of that date. And so we have an example of that. December 31st, you make a payment under a binding written contract, and then you would have to receive the equipment to incur it by April 15th of 25. Needless to say, there is a lot of nuance to these rules that in an attempt to try to consolidate it down to 15 to 20 minutes is completely lost. It is a little more complicated, and by that I mean a lot more complicated than I'm suggesting, but in an effort to try to give the highlights, that's just what we're trying to do for people who may watch this on recording. Physical work test. I think the second bullet point's the most important one. There's no minimum amount of work or monetary percentage threshold required to satisfy this test. A lot of times people like to build roads. Todd referenced the Clean Energy Council. They did an entire webcast on this, and they had a number of people on there, and they like roads. We like roads. We like roads that are specifically made for purposes of equipment, movement, and trucks that are specific for doing projects, things of that nature. That way you're able to demonstrate that, you're doing things related to the project itself. You're commencing the manufacture and assembly of equipment, which, by the way, you can also do off-site. It doesn't necessarily have to be on-site. So constructing foundational supports essential for the operation of the energy equipment. Those are also good examples. The IRS has a ton of examples of things that do qualify. Our suggestion to clients is not to find a creative thing that is not listed. If you can find something that's listed in the guidance that's solid, go with that rather than finding a niche idea that perhaps on audit might not hold up. And here we go. These are just additional examples that are listed in the notices, and I just want to be mindful of my time as well. This is an implementation plan that will be available for people to take a look at when they take a look at the slides, and sort of gives a number of steps as to how Baker Tilly would approach that. Let's talk FIAC very quickly because I do want to be mindful. So FIAC restrictions existed originally under Section 30D, which was the Clean Vehicle Credit. Some FIAC limitations you can know, are you a designated terrorist organization? Are you on the list of specifically designated nationals and black persons list? That's pretty easy to figure out. We know who those people are and we can identify them. Where things become a little more complicated are on specified foreign entities and foreign influenced entities. Both are considered prohibited foreign entities, and any prohibited foreign entity is a FIAC. And again, these rules start to take effect in tax years after July 4 of 25. They really kick in a meaningful way, though, after January 1st of this year. So specified foreign entities, again, there's a list you can look at. They're all laid out there. Foreign influenced entities, though, are a little more complex. It goes into ownership, who can appoint officers, who owns certain percentages of an organization, who holds debt, and whether or not there's effective control over a technology or a facility. And that means whether or not you can tell the producer of that product whether or not they can produce it and who they can produce it for. We are waiting for IRS guidance that has yet to be provided. So all we really can do at this point is look at the statute and talk about that. This is a laundry list of all of the credits that are impacted by this and which they happen to be, who can claim it, sourcing of components, licensing of it. What I'd really like to do, though, is talk about this. This is the material assistance cost ratio. And essentially, this is a calculation that's done. It's similar to domestic content, where you look at the total cost of all the manufactured products in your project. You subtract the total cost of manufactured products from a prohibited foreign entity, and then you divide it by the total cost. That gives you a percentage. Those percentages are critically important because it's an all or nothing designation. You either meet this test and you pass it, or you fail it and your credit is then disqualified. So it's critically important. This is super complicated, as you can see, because depending upon the credit you're looking at and the year you're in, those percentages continue to increase. So again, nothing gets easier the farther we get on the calendar. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to this or looking at this, think about the technology they're looking at and when they're going to begin construction, or in the instance of 45X, which is a production credit, when they're going to produce the items, and see what those requirements may be. It doesn't mean you can't have foreign components in your project. It means you can't have too many foreign components in your project as a percentage. Effective control, again, these are things that are listed on the slides. We're waiting for guidance from the IRS to help us interpret exactly what this means. I think it's very much an open-ended question at this point. And I'll just leave you with actions today. If you can begin construction before the end of this calendar year, you will have done your organization a tremendous favor. If not, you definitely want to keep July 4th of 26 in mind in order to ensure you get the solar and the wind benefits. You want to start thinking about FIAC now because it's not going to become easier. And you want to start looking to your supply chain, talking to your lenders because they can be impacted by FIAC. And to the degree you have other parties that are involved as tax investors, speak with them. There are changes, but this is still very navigable and it is still cash for tribes. And I think it's very important. So with that, I apologize if I went over a little bit and I will turn it back over to Matt.
thanks so much. And yeah, so my takeaway is I'm gonna go build a road in my yard just in case I want to do solar and get a tax credit, or maybe I'll pour a pad somewhere. Um,
Excellent point.
and I think it is daunting, but I think to the point of especially a lot of microgrid projects are going to have battery components, and even though the solar and wind has gotten harder, for some of the tribal projects that we're not directly involved in, but that are happening. There's biomass, there's small hydro, and there's a lot of batteries. And so, those technologies are still eligible. And if it's $1 million project, if you can make that a $700,000 project or a $500,000 project, that's a pretty huge win, even though there's, these hoops to jump through, and there's work to do on the front end to capture it. It's not a trivial financial value to the projects if you can capture it. So I'm gonna hand it over to Rich, who again we're thankful is sort of swooping in last minute to cover the Northern Rural Energy Network, which is a new initiative, and this is much more focused on like sort of the customer side of things. I mean the tax credits and and also just kind of the overall approach that Todd was talking about, could be customer sort of behind the meter things, or power plant front of the meter, utility connected systems. The NREN programs are more targeting small businesses, tribes, even residents. But there's a lot of resources that are particularly relevant to our region and are being kind of crafted for our region. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rich.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Craig and Todd. It's really an honor to be part of such a distinguished panel with so many years of experience, and appreciate the width and breadth of both of your expertise. And as Matthew said, I'm going to share my screen here so we can follow along. Everyone can see this here. Oh, there we go. Everyone can see my first slide. Awesome. So as Matthew said, we are a demand side management program, or a set of programs aiming to uplift rural communities and hard to reach communities in Northern California, which includes our tribal communities. And yeah, we've just launched this April. And so without further ado, who are we? The Northern Rural Energy Network, or NREN, is a regional energy network made up of 4 agencies representing 17 rural counties across Northern California, including the lead agency, Redwood Coast Energy Authority in Humboldt, the Sierra Business Council covering 14 Sierra region counties, the Mendocino Council of Governments that I represent, and the Lake Area Planning Council covering Lake County, with whom we here in Mendocino work very closely with as we share an office building in Ukiah. We've been authorized by the CPUC to use funds collected from PG&E ratepayers to serve hard-to-reach rural communities in our region by filling service gaps left by traditional energy efficiency programs that until now largely only served urban areas. We are the first regional energy network fully focused on serving rural communities. Our mission is to deliver energy cost savings to these cherished but long neglected communities, and in doing so, strengthening community resilience by insulating them from rising energy costs and improving grid management. Our vision is to empower rural communities by providing tools and knowledge to make informed, cost-effective energy decisions. And we do that through our various programs, including residential services, which are available now. Our no-cost residential offerings are available to any PG&E customer in the aforementioned counties, and you can go ahead and apply on our website. I'll put the link on the last slide there to receive an energy efficiency kit and or a home energy assessment at no cost to you. The kit is valued at over $100 and can be mailed directly to customers' homes or picked up at outreach events. Inside, we've got 7 LED light bulbs, an advanced power strip, an energy use meter, weatherization tools, and more. The home energy assessments are currently conducted over the phone by one of our trained energy assessors who identify energy inefficiencies and provide a detailed report that describes no, low cost, and investment actions tailored to each customer that will help them save energy and money. We also have residential rebates available for folks where we offer money back on energy efficiency purchases such as induction ranges and cooktops, dishwashers, room air conditioners, heat pump space heaters, air filters, and heat pump water heaters. Our broad goal is to incentivize the adoption of heat pump technologies, electrify homes, and improve the efficiency of appliances without sacrificing comfort. We will soon also offer rebates to commercial customers. We are in the design phase for this program and are planning on rolling out lighting and heat pump water heater measures early next year and hoping to add HVAC projects to our catalog later on in 2026. We also aim to serve public entities, including tribal governments. Our public entity program offers energy audit, will offer energy audits and offer technical support for public facilities to make energy efficient upgrades. We'll also offer assistance accessing grants and other funding sources. We are in the design phase as well and are rolling out in Q1 of 2026. A recurring theme of our program that I haven't touched on yet is that we serve to educate and direct folks to existing programs as well as provide services directly to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks and everybody is able to access all the resources available to them. It's a very wide world of energy efficiency assistance programs, and we hope to help navigate folks through that and take feedback from the communities to tailor our offerings to the needs of our community members. In 26 and 27, our workforce education and training program aims to do just that by connecting working professionals to existing education and training programs, while by the next business cycle in 2028, we aim to be in collaboration with those programs and actively developing a unique curriculum with tribes, community-based organizations, high schools, and colleges. I might have the world record for the fastest presentation here. Our role in renewable energy expansion and economic advancement in the Redwood region is, as I said, demand side. So it's to draw down demand and allow for renewable energy sources to serve a greater percentage of our region and to provide the economic benefits directly to hard to reach and historically disadvantaged communities. As discussed in previous slides, we aim to do this not only with direct financial incentives in the form of rebates, but also by empowering folks to take an active role in the energy efficiency movement through our public equity, workforce education, and training programs. All of our programs are being developed with the community in mind and by incorporating feedback, and as I said, identifying the needs and gaps in services of our hard to reach communities. And that's what we mean when we say by rural for rural. And I appreciate you all giving me the time. Didn't take much, but appreciate the time and opportunity. I threw this slide deck together in a day, so pardon the abridged nature of it. But I've included my contact information as well as my manager's Orion, who I filled in for, and our website down at the bottom there. If you'd like to learn more, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to dive into the programs and share more as they are developed and implemented. So thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much, Rich. And again, thanks for parachuting in at the last minute to cover, and as you mentioned, this program, which, from the Redwood Rise context, unfortunately doesn't serve Delmar County just due to the way that the state funding is structured around utility service areas. But it's launching this year, and it's going to be serving Humboldt, Mendocino, and Lake counties. And as you alluded to, it's going to continue to grow and expand those program offerings. And it's also it's a sort of a long-term funding stream. I mean, not that things can't change, but the state's generally a little less volatile than the federal government has been recently as far as funding for energy programs. And so this is funded through the Public Utility Commission, ratepayer funds. And there's multi-year cycles, and this program's funded for tens of millions of dollars on a basis that could continue for years and years into the future. So there's a lot of resources that are going to be delivered to our region through these programs as they continue to grow. And again, they're focused on the customer side, sort of the demand side. But whether that's layered on, I mean, our Blue Lake microgrid is all behind the meter, so everything's the customer side. So these programs and resources can, help us address things. Um, and so, it's a great pool of services, particularly for sort of the residential to small business to municipal or tribal government scale sort of facilities projects.
And sorry, Matthew, I will add that we've already received some interest from counties in Northern California outside of our current um, range to be implementing partners. So expansion is still an option. We are brand new, so expansion is still a possibility. And like you said, the funding is fairly secure, and we're doing our new business plan right now and submitting that at the beginning of the year. So exciting times for sure.
Thanks. So we've got a few minutes for questions, and no one ever hated leaving a webinar early, but and I would also invite questions between the panelists because I think there was a lot of great content, and I think these things can layer together. I guess a question that I had on the tax credits, um, the key takeaways, like you said, were sort of like start construction, yesterday if you could, tomorrow if possible.
Yes.
And then I think the other one, to make sure that people realize is don't lose hope, even, especially if you're doing solar and batteries. Like, well, okay, you can't get it for the solar, but that doesn't mean just to turn your back on it as an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you raised a great point, which is battery is still massive. In all the projects I'm looking at, there's a battery component, and that's still going to be valuable. We're seeing a huge interest in hydro. I've started to see geothermal as well. And, the best part about the technology neutral credits, they're not defined. Under the old code, you had like 10 technologies, and this is what you could get it on. Somebody could invent something down the road. I'm sure somebody's thinking about it right now. And if it has, zero greenhouse gas emissions or less, you could have the opportunity to generate an investment tax credit or a production tax credit on if you meet those rules. But yeah, I mean, there's still an opportunity for solar and for wind. So I wouldn't give up hope. Some projects may have to be scaled back a little with those technologies associated with them, but there's still, arguably speaking, to 2034, an opportunity to monetize these benefits for your organization and get cash back. And that's positive.
Yeah, I'll add that we've had 4 or 5 of these ITC cliffs, I feel like, in the last 20-year period, certainly 3 or 4. So just because these are the current, this is the current world we live in right now, but it could be a much brighter space from a tax credit perspective within a couple of years, with the new legislature, or certainly, or hopefully within 3 to 4 or 4 more years, 3 or 4 more years or so. But these projects are fundamentally sound. The technology's there. People know what best practices are for building them. The capital, there's way more capital available than there are quality projects at the moment, and I believe that's going to continue. Now it's going to be really nice once we get through all the gray area with some of these new regulations, and we've got more certainty because that'll bring more capital back to the market. But just because we have this complexity and maybe intentional complexity that's getting added doesn't mean shouldn't keep developing good quality projects and moving them forward. Just some things may need to go, wait a longer, but keep developing, keep prepping. And, we're here and other organizations are here to help navigate through the chaos and get through it at the end of the day with good quality projects and keep moving. That's my don't worry, don't over fearful. Just keep moving along and working on something positive because it's all good work. And each one of these projects can really be an economic engine for each community. So there's a lot of reason to rally these projects.
And A question for you, Todd, on sort of the financing piece of it. So you're talking about that there's capital out there to invest. Obviously, there's the tax credits, there's rebates, there's grants. But at the end of the day, if you can finance a project, and most sort of commercial, projects that are getting built aren't relying on grants. They're financing them, and they're, the projects you worked on, I'm sure weren't going around saying, well, we're not going to do this until we get a grant. Um, and obviously there's going to be a different sort of outlook depending on what the project is. Like in the old days, you could, change out a incandescent light bulb for a CFL, and the payback period was like by the time you got to the mailbox, practically, it had paid for itself. For a renewable energy project, it's going to be a longer time frame. But what would you sort of, as an example, not a perfect average, but if someone's kind of thinking about like, well, if I was going to do a solar project, what should I expect, the financing, is it a 20-year term? What are you sort of seeing, just to give people a sense of like, how long are you in this thing, before you're sort of like, all right, it's earned itself, and that's changed for rooftop solar, but I don't know what you've seen for projects that you've been working on recently is kind of, the time frames involved.
Yeah, in terms of the payback period or how much you can lever up a project, it really depends. But that being said, Northern California is actually one of the more attractive regions in the country because unfortunately the cost of power is so high. So you can build a system and still have a levelized cost of energy that is at or ideally below what your marginal price is, being paid to PG&E or some other providers in the region, just because energy's so high, the price is so high, and it's in the foreseeable future, it looks like it's unfortunately going to be going up for a bit. So, but in terms of uh, payback period or how to get there. Um, Trying to pull together as many revenue streams as possible and retain as much of the value of those revenue streams or the leakage, keep it to a minimum, keep as much of the cash flowing in the community. I don't think I feel like I'm not answering your question. Well,
Well, I think you
yeah,
got to it in what you said before of like, if you can finance something with a cost of energy that's below what you would otherwise be paying. So, if you're able to say, well, I was going to be paying whatever, $10,000 a year in utility bills, and now I'm going to be paying $9,000 a year in loan payments,
yeah.
you're able to have a net win.
I would add that too often, perhaps there's a focus on savings, and this is one of the problems I had with the Solar for All program. Just to qualify, you had to be showing 20% savings year one relative to your incumbent energy. Having a more or less known energy price, especially if there's a PPA involved, could be a 20-year plus contract. The value of knowing what your energy rates are going to be over that time horizon and avoiding the volatility is critically important, especially for municipal facilities. When you're planning long range, knowing exactly what you're going to be paying for a specific volume of energy and taking that volatility out of the picture from a CFO's perspective, that's gold if I'm working in a muni, just knowing I don't have to worry about the volatility in my budget for that line item, especially if you've got large loads. So um, there's definite potential benefits to be had through savings year one in Northern California still, but don't discount the value of knowing what your energy price is and owning your own assets. That's one thing I didn't talk about, but our general approach from the get-go is the assumption that tribes are going to own the assets outright from the get-go, not third-party financing where somebody else comes in as the equity owner and the project eventually flips to the tribe. We can arrange that. We meet tribes wherever they're at in their vision, wherever they want to be. If they want somebody else to come in as the owner and have a buyout option down the road, we can certainly support that. But ideally, we start, from our perspective, we're always starting with under the assumption tribes will own them outright. And So to have the ownership of the asset, you're not relying on somebody else to keep your lights on to a certain extent. It's a real exercise in sovereignty by owning your own energy infrastructure and then keeping the cash flows through the O&M and other services that could be maintained with community members. There's job creation there and helping your tribal leadership manage their budget through known energy pricing and more resilient energy, so less exposure to blackouts, losing perishables and refrigerators and freezers or kids missing school. I mean, you add up all the value, the real value, the holistic value, not just the avoided cost from the utility. And the numbers pencil it probably even without any ITC whatsoever, if you really do all the math.
Great. Thanks. Well, I think we're at time. I really want to thank the three of you for sharing your insights and making this information available. And we can share that out with the broader RISE group. And I guess I'll hand it back to the RGS team for any closing comments.
Yeah, thank you, Matt and Todd, Craig, and Rachel for being here. What a powerful lineup of presentations here on this topic. Really great job. I think it will be very, very useful for this region. We always encourage this economic development finance working group to be kind of ambassadors of getting this information to the region and those who are closely involved with RISE or those who are kind of still working on their own and bringing them into this knowledge. So this was really great to hear. I also want to, Matt, I don't know if I presented all of your titles at the beginning of presentation. For those who might be listening, I just want to state them here that you're the Director of Energy, Resilience, and Business Development for the Blue Lake Range area, and you're also our Sector Coordinator for Renewable Resilient Energy for the Redwood Region RISE under the California Jobs Efforts. So thank you very much for putting this panel together. Like I said, it's a really powerful discussion. I think the tactical tools that Todd's organization offers and Craig, all of your really technical knowledge, you'll probably have to rewind that presentation multiple times before we figure out which one fits us for each project. And rich introduction of your new efforts there was really, really great. So thank you all for being here. We'll distribute this to everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing the Economic Development Working Group next year in January. So thank you all.